Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. I am Dennis Shao, the co-organizer of this wonderful group. Today, we're going to be talking about using original research to improve your content marketing results. Our presenter is Becky Lawlor, Head of Content and Research at Redpoint. Becky has used original research for her clients, and here are some of the results that her clients have achieved. 2 to 3 times more leads than previous campaigns, 2.5 million readers reached, 80 plus media mentions, 10 plus long form editorials, and $255,000 worth of free media and advertising. Becky, thanks for joining, and take it away.
Great. Let me share my screen and we'll get going here. All right. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Great. So just real quick, whoops, it's not. Oh, sorry. I was like, it's not moving forward. I wasn't patient enough. Dennis just gave the intro, so I don't think I need to spend too much time here, but I do run a boutique original research and content marketing agency, and I've been working in the content marketing space for over a decade. I mentioned, Craig asked me earlier to give a little intro about myself. So I mentioned I've worked with brands like IBM, Samsung, and Adobe, worked with smaller startups and mid-sized companies as well, producing thought leadership content, a lot of white papers, ebooks, that kind of thing that have always been based on a lot of them were based on third party or qualitative, doing a lot of interviews. But I've moved into the original research space as part of that process, just as my own journey got me really excited about original research and feeling like that, as somebody else said, the last bastion of where content is going. I feel that more passionately as we see more AI generated content coming out, that producing original content of any type, whether you're using quantitative or qualitative research, is really going to be key moving forward if you really want to stand out and kind of engage folks at a high level. So I wanted to start with a quote from one of my clients that I worked with. They, when they first approached me, they wanted to do just a white paper, and we discussed what their goals were, and they ended up agreeing to go ahead and try doing an original research piece instead of just doing a white paper where I would go out and source third-party data. And a lot of the findings that Dennis just noted came from their first, we just completed their second one this year, and they're already seeing great results again, but came from their very first project. I just wanted, before we kind of dive into how you get these results, so I wanted to go over the kind of results that you can expect to achieve. And this 2020 remote work report, this is actually from Erin Balsa. She used to work at the Predictive Index, and she has shared this with me. She has, this was just, I wanted to give, they're not my client, this was her own experience, but I wanted to share not just what my clients have achieved, but kind of what I've seen out there in the marketplace, what they achieved from their own original research. And in this case, I also want to be clear what I'm mostly talking about here. There's a lot of different ways to do original research. This is brand owned original research. Obviously, you can go out and hire Gartner or Forrester or somebody else to do more of an analyst type original research. So what I'm walking you through here is results of companies that have done branded research and produce and then turn that into content. So in addition to what Dennis read, which was, and several of my clients have seen 2 to 3 times more leads than previous campaigns. And Industrial Physics did see on their first campaign that they were able to reach 2.5 million readers, get 80 plus media mentions, place more than 10 plus long form editorials, and they were able to equate that to about 255,000 worth of free media and advertising. The other thing that they saw was prestigious speaking engagements. They had actually applied to some trade shows in the past where they'd wanted to speak and had been declined. When they applied with their research in hand, they actually not only were accepted, but got prime kind of prime time speaking engagements, and that's been a huge additional kind of lead driver and brand awareness for them. I have this other one, this 215% increase in traffic is, I just want to be clear, when they're not my client, this isn't my client, but this was another brand that did original research, and they saw just over what they had, like they published their report in June, and she said, you know, in April of that year that they had 742 in their traffic. They're a smaller company, they're a startup, and they were just using the research to kind of generate traffic, and by June they had 2,400 in-site traffic. It also increased their domain rating from 10 to 30. And another person I spoke with said that they've seen an 84% increase in email newsletter subscriptions since they published an original research report. And several of my clients and other folks have said, you know, the other piece of this is that you generate content topics and supporting data that can be used up to for a year. So you get a lot of kind of mileage just on the content front from it. So that's kind of some of the ROI that I've seen out there that I just wanted to share with you. So how do you make sure that you're going to achieve this ROI and achieve success with your original research? In my opinion, there's kind of three things that you need to be focused on in order to do that. The first is your research strategy and your research goals. Whoops, that was supposed to say the report itself. Sorry, we have strategy goals, which are the same thing. Sorry, I missed that in my. And the third one is the survey design. So I'm going to dive into those. So your research strategy, when you're setting it out, the first thing you need to be thinking about is your research needs to align with your brand. You need to be thinking about something, a topic that in some way aligns with your brand, your products, your solutions. And you also want to be thinking about what your brand's business goals are and what you want to achieve with the research. You know, different people have different goals with the research. If thought leadership is your most important goal, then that needs to be set out at the beginning. If your most important goal is lead gen or press or whatever it is, you need to set those goals and objectives at the beginning, and you need to think about how it aligns with what you do and the customers that you serve. The second piece is the research needs to bring unique insights to the marketplace. So in this step, I do typically some competitive analysis with what research is out there. You know, you want to make sure that you're not just doing something that you're not doing something that other folks are already doing, that you're going to bring a unique data to the marketplace, that you're not asking the same questions. Like I know you probably all know there could be a whole bunch of different variations on state of marketing or whatever. So you want to make sure that you actually, if you're going to do some kind of marketing research report, that you're actually picking an angle that hasn't been done, and you're going to come up with some data and topics that haven't been dug into as much. So it's important to look at what's already out there. And then you need to think about that the research needs to have a particular interest with your target audience. You want to make sure that right from the outset you're thinking about what will actually resonate with them, what will make them want to click in and read the data. So you need to have all three of these pieces in place before you even begin to design your survey, because you need to know where you're headed at the end. The second piece is the survey design, and this is one I see that a lot of people think is simple and they can just whip out a survey. And I would just caution you that you really need to think through the survey design more, because it actually has a huge impact on whether you're getting interesting and quality data. And I've seen this from my own clients that I've worked with. I had one client who'd been doing a state of IT ops report for 3 or 4 years, but they kind of were evaluating whether they should keep doing it because they were getting kind of meh results from it. And in speaking to them after we worked through the project, speaking to them, one of the things was that their previous vendor was really leaning on them to help them with the survey. And, you know, they're not survey experts. It's not what they do. And because the survey wasn't strong, they weren't actually getting strong and interesting data, which then meant that the report wasn't that great, which meant that the engagement with the report was low. So when they switched and they worked with me, they actually saw 3 times the leads in 1 month over what they'd gotten a whole entire year previously. So that, I believe, came from really stepping back to the survey and reformatting the types of questions they were asking, the format they were using for the questions. Because the first piece of it is the questions need to be designed in a way that can translate into strong headlines and messaging. And so this is really important, whether you do it yourself or if you work with a research vendor, that they have a background in understanding not just how to do research, but if you're doing this for content marketing purposes, you need to be thinking, and PR and all that, you need to be thinking about how am I asking that question? And if I ask it in that way, is it going to translate back to a strong headline? And some of that even can go in the format. For example, with this client, the previous survey used a lot of rating scales of, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, rate where you're at with, you know, this maturity on something that they were doing. And the problem there is now you've asked people to spread out their answers over 10 buckets. So you're probably going to get weak percentage points because you have people choosing between 1 to 10. And that's going to dilute. You're not going to get like probably an 85% because people have so many options to choose from. So if you want to have a strong stat, you're much better off asking them, you know, more of a 4-point kind of question, which could be like, I'm very likely, somewhat likely, likely, not very likely, in that manner, because you're consolidating the buckets that they can respond to, which is going to help you have more consolidated percentage points and give you a clearer picture of the trend. So that's just one example of how you need to be thinking about the survey design and the type of questions and how you format them. And the questions need to be designed to uncover interesting and unique insights. And that kind of goes back to, how are you writing them? What are you asking? How closely are you aligning that with, you know, what your target audience is interested in? And then the third piece is you need survey design practices need to be applied that ensure accurate and high quality data. I just was looking at a survey that was out online, and it was actually, I'm not going to name the name, but a very large company that everybody knows. And they didn't have any kind of qualifiers entering the survey in terms of who was taking it. And it was actually for folks in DevOps, but it never even asked me if I was in DevOps. So anybody could come take that survey. And I went through and answered it, but that's not my expertise. So I went through it in terms of just wanting to see what they were asking and stuff. But anyway, the point is they weren't actually going to get really accurate insights if they don't actually qualify who is answering it. And the other thing is, you know, looking to make sure people aren't speeding through, that they are taking the time and reading the questions and not just clicking the bubbles. So there's a whole bunch of other survey design practices to make sure that the questions aren't biased, that the questions are clear so that people actually are answering the question as it should be understood. So I just kind of want to say that the survey design is actually, in my opinion, very critical and something you really need to think carefully about when you are conducting this type of original research. And then the last piece is that you need to produce a high quality research report. And this can typically be, that's kind of the cornerstone. And from here, you can slice it and dice it and create a whole bunch of different content assets and use it in a bunch of different ways. But I think it is very valuable to have a cornerstone report that you first produce before you kind of do a bunch of different other types of content and content distribution. And you need to make sure that you have a strong data story that you're telling. I also really strongly encourage the use of bringing in internal and external experts to add credibility and additional insights. Having external experts, you know, comment on the data, that helps both in adding additional credibility, as well as when you get to content distribution, they can be additional folks that can promote your research. So I think it could be helpful on both of those fronts. And you also, the graphic design matters. You want to make sure that it's well designed so that key points and data are scannable. You know, this one is the kind of report I'm highlighting here is a little bit, you know, it does have text and content. Sometimes, depending again on your goals with the report and what you're trying to do, sometimes it can be even more visually focused and less text focused. But if you are going to have a text focused one, you still want to make sure that you're making the data portion of it fairly scannable and engaging that way. And then I want to just talk briefly about, not everybody, PR isn't always the point, but for a lot of folks, PR is one of the things that you would want to be doing. Obviously, you can bring in a PR agency, and if you're going to do that, I recommend you do that right at the start of the project rather than bringing them in once you have the report and you want to get the press from it, because they can also help you inform that strategy and work with your research vendor on making sure that, you know, what are the headlines we want to get? What would be the kind of key stats that we would love to see if the data ends up showing those? So working from that right from the get-go. Another piece of this is, and these also just to give you, I'm not a PR agency, but I sat down and came up with these by working with my client and their PR agency and talking about what they'd learned through their own process. So this is where these kind of insights are based on, just so you know. You want to be really targeted with who you go after, so you're reaching the right people and the right publications. And one thing that my client learned, the first year they wrote just one press release and then tried to distribute it. This year, they wrote multiple press releases with targeted messages for specific industries and audiences, and that was a more successful strategy for them. So, you know, you can get more mileage out of it if you're willing to kind of do that extra work and be a little bit more targeted. You can use PR tools to help find relevant publications. Another really effective strategy for my client was actually using their organic relationships that their company and technical experts had in the industry. And they actually got more publications from that than from their PR agency reaching out and trying to get placements. So if you have technical experts that are already publishing occasionally in trade publications, having them reach out and secure those long form editorials is a good strategy. Another strategy is offering that media exclusivity for a 24-hour period to the publication you really want to have pick it up. And providing personalized messages to publications with a few synopsis of potential angles for the editorials, and then allowing them to pick the topic of interest was another way that they saw a lot of traction. So again, a little bit more legwork, but the outcomes are stronger. And then developing long form editorial pieces from a CEO, CMO, or other technical product experts is another way to kind of get those long form editorials published. And then I wanted to talk just briefly about the content distribution strategy. So step one is you want to go all in across all channels, all types of content strategies. You know, you've made this big investment in the research. So, you know, it should be on your social media, it should be in your newsletter, it should be, you should be creating blogs from it, infographics, webinars, like I said, you know, speaking engagements. So really think about every way you distribute content. Sales enablement pieces is another one. So really think about all of the different ways that you can distribute this, all the channels that you have to distribute it, and use it all. If you want the media mentions in PR, make sure you're engaging PR firm, or you have if you're doing it internally, that you have some PR strategy and how you're going to execute that. You also want to have a digital strategy that includes outbound emails. I mean, this kind of goes back to step one a little bit, but just social media, blog posts that are optimized for search, landing pages, webinars, and then, like I said, trade shows and events. So again, just trying to make sure that you're really getting the most from it. And that is, that's kind of the presentation. So I'd like to open it up to question and answer, and hopefully I didn't rush through that too quickly, but I just wanted to give you kind of the background. And I guess the other thing I will say, this was about kind of doing that survey-based quantitative. But if you have internal data, like if you happen to, I don't know, be a marketing analytics software or something, there's also a lot of opportunity to think about internal data that you have that could be translated again into some kind of content form where you, maybe it's a benchmarking and you can share out how what you're seeing internally and how that translates as an industry. So it doesn't always have to be survey-based research, but I think anytime you can find ways to use unique original data and put that into your content, you're opening up a great opportunity to see really strong results out in the marketplace.
Thanks for the presentation, Becky. Does anyone have questions? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'll start with one.
Sure.
So it's a two-part, if you don't mind. When you work with a client on one of these research projects, how do you decide what survey platform to use? And the second part,
go ahead.
The second part was tell us what you think about this approach in surveys of, I think it's called conditional branching. So if you pick one value on a question, it'll branch off to a follow-up that ties back to that choice.
Yeah, so first, I mean, I have like, if somebody works with me, I have my own survey software that I use. There's a bunch out there in the market. So if you're going with a research vendor, they have their software that they're going to use for it. Mine happens to be Alchemer, and Qualtrics is another one. I think you do want one, if you're doing this at a serious level, you want one that does allow you to do that conditional branching or have different logic options. So you can use something free like Google or Typeform, but I think again, those, and we didn't talk, and we can, if people want to know, we can get more into like, how do you find your audience and how do you survey them? Those are like, I focus the presentation on the ROI point, but there's a whole bunch of other pieces that go into actually executing this project. So happy to answer questions along those lines if people have them. But to your second point about the conditional branching, yes, you should use it. You need to think through the questions, like if you have, for example, sometimes I will have where you're asking, you want to actually do some comparison of what the C-suite thinks versus what the practitioners think. And so you might have some questions that they're saying, but you might also want to ask questions to those different questions to those different audiences because they have different knowledge bases. So in that case, you would put in some, kind of conditional branching where if they identifies this type of role or level in the organization, they're going to get these questions and not these ones. And if they're this person, they're going to get these questions and not this one. Or it may be, you don't want to ask somebody, if they answer no to something, then the next question isn't relevant to them. So you want to make sure that you're not essentially wasting their time answering questions that they're going to click not applicable to because they already just said no in the previous question. So I do think that that is important. And it's it kind of goes back to your survey needs to be like a best practice in survey length is you really don't typically want to go beyond like a 7 to 8 minute survey. I mean, I see a lot out there that are 15 minutes, but you're going to get a lot higher drop off and fatigue. So the more that you can do to eliminate asking people questions that they don't need to answer and consolidate the time it's going to take them to answer it will help with getting more people to actually complete the survey. And that also goes to the types of questions you ask. You want to try to keep them, the majority of them, as simple as possible, because again, that's kind of a cognitive load for them. And if they have to think too hard, people are going to drop out. They're willing to do it on a question here or there, but if every question is a heavy cognitive list, they're gonna say, this isn't worth my time.
Excellent. Do you have a question, Rich?
Yeah, I pulled over safely here. Becky, thanks. Listen to most of your present. I'll catch the replay too. I think early on you said either research for thought leadership or demand generation. My question is for clients you typically work with, is it one or the other or both? What's the ratio? I could see it going both ways. I know it depends, but what are you seeing most clients you engage with? Are they using the research just for pure thought leadership, or are they gating it for demand gen? Or
I actually see most of them want to get both from it. It's not really an either or, and I don't think they actually really have to pick between those two at all, really. So most of them do gate the initial report, and that's kind of that lead gen, capture emails. But then the thought leadership piece comes from really using it like in speaking engagements or trying to get the press from it, and that sort of thing. So I can't say, that it's one or the, I haven't really seen a trend where it's one or the other. I do have some clients where the main goal is thought leadership and some where the main goal is lead gen. But they want to achieve both of those. Like if one goal is the primary, the secondary goal is the other one. So.
Right. And by the way, I was the person at the start who said, kind of the last bastion of truly engaging content, right? And you made the comment of, well, yeah, as with the ascendancy of AI, let's double down on original research. Do you see AIs playing an expanded role in the work that you do? And over time, maybe it does start to impact the content in a way that is useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right now, like as a content, like from the content writer, marketer, kind of like somebody who's written content, I think right now lower quality content is being produced, right? So it's not really invading into what I consider the thought leadership space. Some people are using it maybe for that kind of SEO blog content that really, but they're not putting anything in there that's of interest. It's just more to get the keyword search is where I see kind of it will first kind of permeate the market. I don't, it's hard to know how advanced it's going to get. But I think that there is certainly a possibility that it will start to creep up and be able to do, more complex. Maybe I've tried feeding it like a case study transcript and seeing what it can do there, and it can't really do that yet. It makes up its own quotes. And even when you give it the transcript, it suddenly says somebody says something they didn't say. Like you have to go back and you're like, that is not in the transcript, right? So you do need to be really careful. And it's not there yet, but I could see in a couple of years that you could feed it a transcript for something that's like a case study is very formulaic. You've got your, challenge, solution, results, and maybe it could do a lot of that lift at some point. So, but I think where it won't be able to do the lift is really, and where I think even now and in the future, for myself and for others, is those interviews, right? Like, I think interview-based content, I'm a huge believer in it, both internal and external, because your internal thought leaders just, even if you're not quoting them and you're just using the background, they just have so much knowledge that will separate that content out from all of the other content on the topics, because they can just go deeper and have a different insight and angle. So that's where I think that AI will probably not be able to, and again, I don't think you could probably just feed it a bunch of data and have it really be able to because it's pulling from its past history. So if you're feeding it new data, I'm not sure that it can make the connections of what that new data is really saying in the marketplace. But
yeah, I'm not sending my AI to go interview my thought leader, right? Not now, right? The nuance, the back and forth in a dialogue. Anyway, thank you so much. I also want to mention, Dennis, when is Rosemary's talk? We have another talk on AI ChatGPT, I think in August, right?
Yes.
Good.
I forgot the exact date, but it's in August. It's in August, and it's on our meetup page.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Rich, I was just going to mention one other thing that I've seen just in the content space around AI and thought leadership, though. What I've seen is writers frustrated because the subject matter expert that they're supposed to interview, if they're doing it like an email question, they're like somebody just sent me AI generated feedback.
Oh, really?
And I can tell that this is not them. They tried to like push this task off and say, Chat GPT, answer these questions for me.
Oh, no.
So I have seen that. I mean, it hasn't happened to me personally, but I have had other writers complaining on forums that they're like, I know this is a Chat GPT response and not the SME taking the time to answer this. So,
That's, we caught you cheating on the test. You fail.
right.
Thank you. Wow.
Anybody else have another question just about the research process or anything?
What kind of budget should companies expect to put to it? I know it's all over the map, but what are some guidelines? If you want this, then think of this kind of budget. If you want this, is there any kind of
Yeah, I can just tell you. So I know that if you want like a Gartner or you want to be in Harvard Business Review or whatever, you need to be, it's going to be well over 100,000. So if you want that level of, and that's really where they are the brand behind it, and so it's more of an analyst research. And the other thing to be aware on that is a lot of those, also have they have their own intellectual property kind of clauses around it. So you're actually somewhat limited in how you can use it and how long you can use it. So, but that's a different category. If you're looking to do the branded research, again, it can be all over the map. I think there's a lot that charge around 50, 60,000 still. I'm a smaller boutique, and so I charge, I think for me, and depending again what you're doing and how you're doing it, a $20,000 to $30,000 budget, including getting a report, is reasonable. So, but again, it depends, and some of that depends on your audience and who you're going to survey, how many you're going to survey, whether you're going to do it by email, if you have a large enough email list. If you're going out to do an audience panel, that's where the prices, how many people you want to survey. And I can get more into like for a B2B audience, like how many do you need and all of that. I don't know if that's of interest to people, but I can dig into that more if that is.
Becky, that was going to be my question. Thanks for the promotion stuff. That's good. That you presented. But I was going to ask that for the B2C audience, what do you think is the threshold? And for B2B, what do you think is the threshold for press coverage?
Yeah, so by B2C, I mean, my question is how I really distinguish it is, are you surveying consumers or are you surveying other professionals? Yeah,
consumers for the B2C one, and then for B2B, obviously.
So for consumers, I think you do need around 1,000 as a minimum threshold. They are also a lot less expensive to survey, so makes it easier to get that. You can typically survey them for a couple of dollars per response. If you're looking to do a B2B professional survey, it depends exactly how niche you're going and how high level you're going, but typically a minimum threshold I say is 100 would be like the minimum. I think if you can get to like a 250, then you're in really solid ground, and depending what you're doing in your budget, if you can get 500, then that's a really, really strong showing. I will tell you, and research backs this up, but essentially, as far as truth, I mean, that's what the marketplace wants to see, but as far as true statistical validity goes, there is actually this phenomenon where if you survey 5 people and you see, I mean, I know that's a really small amount, but you see a trend. If you survey 500, you're going to see the same trend. So as long as, if your data is already showing a strong trend, like I was talking with somebody yesterday and they were like, well, I don't know about 500. I think we need 50,000. And what I was trying to say is you're probably actually not going to see anything different in 50,000 than you saw in 500 if your trends are strong, and you are clearly surveying all people that are the right people to be surveying. And I've talked with other researchers and they validated the same thing. And I've read it in data science books and stuff. So that's just something to kind of keep in the back of your head. Like if you survey 100 and you survey or 500, chances are you're actually not going to, like, the trend isn't going to dramatically change between that, but there is sort of just how the marketplace is going to perceive it as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had another question, Becky. So I was in a meeting with a client. They wanted to do a research report. It was targeting senior engineering leaders like CTOs.
Mhm.
And I was meeting with my client, and then her boss was on the meeting. So he has the authority to approve or veto the whole research report.
Right.
And he says, I need the result of this research to be X. So he's basically saying the outcome needs to be this, which academically doesn't feel right. But at the same time, if we said we can't do that, we can't predetermine the outcome, he would have vetoed the project. So how would you have navigated that comment from the VP?
Well, I'm a very transparent parent and honest person, and I don't promise things I can't deliver. So
Okay.
I would have said, look, we can have a hypothesis. I'm asked, and I do go to my clients and I say, what are some hypotheses you would like to prove, right? Let's have 3 hypotheses or 3, like, let's say there's 3 stats you would love to get out of this, and you believe that they are actually possible to get, right? Not just like you want them to say this because that would really sell your solution, but you actually believe from what you know of the marketplace that you probably could get a strong stat. So we're going to ask questions around that, but I can't promise anything because I don't know what the data is going to say. And to promise that, I mean, you just can't.
Right.
So if ultimately the CTO is just unwilling to approve it, then I think you have to accept that reality. I would just try to, again, more sell it on the ROI that it can deliver overall. And say, but being honest that I couldn't promise a stat because how would I possibly know for sure what the data is going to deliver?
Right. I like that. Thank you.
I had a question. Now that I've unmuted myself. So have you seen any kind of trends in terms of the format of the type of original research? And you touched on this a little bit, but I mean, surveys versus user interviews versus, sort of original experiments of the Daniel Kahneman thinking fast and slow type. It's sort of all over the place. But have you seen any trends in terms of what kind of format people are using for doing original research?
Well, I work mostly in the B2B tech space, or at least B2B complex products and services. So I don't know that I can speak to like trends at like every level. I think in the B2B, tech space in general, I think the trend still is to have some kind of cornerstone report and then, peel back other assets. And that could be you asking quantitative or qualitative. I mean, I've done some reports where it's actually just like 10 interviews with CMOs or, because again, those kind of peer-to-peer, to any type of peer-to-peer report, people want to know what other companies like them are doing or what peers like them are, what their challenges are, or how they're solving those challenges or what they're thinking about. So I still think that the kind of, whether you do it visually or textually, that cornerstone report of some type in the B2B space is the most effective kind of foundation for then where you go with your research.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Also, just a note, so I will be posting the recording of this talk to our meetup group.
I'll just throw something else out if people don't have, but I think it's good to think about, we mentioned panels, you either can pay for and find a panel. One thing, if you're going to go out and find a panel, it's important that you find somebody that actually serves B2B audiences. I see, again, a lot of times I'll see people toss out in Slack forums or something like, oh yeah, you could use SurveyMonkey. You can't use SurveyMonkey or Pollfish if you're really trying to reach a niche B2B audience. They have a consumer audience. And all they're going to do is ask their consumer audience, like, do you work in marketing or do you work in, you are much better off and you're going to get much higher quality data. You need to reach out to panels that actually serve the B2B audience that you are looking to survey. So that's one thing to just keep in mind with a B2B panel. If you are going to do it, go the email route, I think I'm just going to set realistic expectations. Email can be great. You really know who your audience is. But the reality is typically the responses are 1% to 2%. So you need to have, if you're trying to get like 500 responses, you need to have a pretty big list. And there can be some variation in that. Like I just did one with a IT company where they were actually surveying, they're a broker and they were surveying their channel partners. So these are the people that actually get business and do business with them. So it's a little bit more motivating than like their customers, right? Because they have an actual business relationship. But even then they had an 8,000 email list and they got 500 responses. So what is the math on that? I think it's around 5%, maybe a little higher. Anyway, so again, you know, you do need to evaluate how engaged your email is. And if you are just buying an email list, you could actually see less than 1% because they're not engaged at all. So just something to consider, you know, when you're thinking about email, is it really going to work for you?
Good tips. All right, I'll put out a last call for comments or questions.
Yeah, I do have a question. Do you have any ideas for small businesses to get original research?
Yeah. So again, like I said, depending if you have any kind of internal data that you can use, that's a great way. Like that's free, right? You've got your own data. You just need to analyze it and think about how you can turn that into something interesting to your target audience. If that doesn't work for you, you don't have internal data, I think the qualitative, just doing interviews with industry experts and like I said, you know, going out, like if you target CTOs, go out and interview CTOs and get qualitative. That again, there can be a little bit of sourcing, but leverage your relationships. If you can't leverage your relationships, I have done, you know, like I've used a VA and gone on LinkedIn, and you do need to offer some kind of incentive. Typically, I'll say like a $200. I want to think if you're going for a C-suite, you need to offer something that's going to be worth their what their time is really worth. So, you know, I might say for a half an hour call, you know, like a $200 Amazon gift certificate or something. And it still can take a lot of legwork to get those, but it's maybe, you know, if you hire a VA or somebody fairly inexpensive to do that, you know, maybe you're spending $1,000 to $1,500 for the time to do the outreach and to compensate 5 to 10 people that you could interview. So that's another way to do that piece of it. And you can do your own like survey-based research, but again, there I would say that's probably going to be most effective if you have somebody internally that has that experience. There are some courses out there that you could take. I know Aaron Balsa does offer a course, but I took it just out of curiosity. I think it's a good lay of the land. I'm not sure that it's 100% in depth enough if you are doing this, but again, internally you could do it that way and you're learning as you go. And I'm not gonna, you know, I think that is an opportunity. And if you go through that process, then if the first one is sort of a learning curve, the second one, you'll know a little bit more what you're doing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have something, Todd, or no? No. All right, Becky. So thanks so much for joining us today. It was a great talk. I got a lot of compliments in the chat. If you've seen, I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I can never focus on the chat while I'm talking.
Okay. lots of compliments. I'll just say that.
Oh, good.
And thanks everyone else for joining us. We've got some more meetups scheduled for the summer, so check our meetup page.
Great. Well, it's nice
Okay,
to have opportunity to talk with all of you. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, Becky.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.